You're listening to the Mystic Menagerie Podcast, your regular descent into the world of alternative entertainment, art, and culture. Bolt the door, light the fire, and pour yourself a glass of virgin rouge, and let your hosts, Dan Baines and Lord Freddie Valentine, guide you through the Stygian depths of your darkest delights. Warning. Listener discretion is advised.
Hello, it's the 14th of October 2014 and you're here with the pilot episode of the Mystic Menagerie Podcast. So we're bringing a lot of exciting things to you. It's very new, so hopefully we'd like to introduce ourselves. So I'm Freddie Valentine and...
I'm Dan Baines.
Excellent, and we've decided to do a podcast for a number of reasons, really. As you know, some people may know, we had a magazine beforehand, which is a PDF file, and that's something that it kind of concerned us, didn't it, Dan?
It did, yeah. It was great while it lasted, and we sold quite a lot of copies, and our reader base was, it was big. But I think, as most people know, we've had issues over the last 12 months with file sharing, and it kind of takes the wind out of your sails a little bit when you're putting a lot of effort into producing a magazine, and for £3.50, someone buys it and then distributes it to all their friends for absolutely nothing at all.
Yeah. And it's heartbreaking because in the community that it's very a minority sort of interest, really. And a lot of the people that are involved in it, we either interact with or we know, or they're customers of either ours, that kind of thing. So we know sort of quite close-knit. So what's quite surprising is there's people that we probably knew that were sending these files out to their friends. It just takes one person to do it, really, doesn't it? And that's the kind of thing that's disheartening. And we did have a few editorials in previous issues of the magazine saying, please can you not do this? We cannot continue or will not continue if you keep doing it. But people keep doing it, So we decided, it's time to we put a lot of hard work into it, a lot of effort into it. To see it just given out freely, even when it's cheap anyway, is quite disheartening, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And I think, we've had numerous chats about what we're going to do because we've put far too much effort into the Mystic Menagerie for it to just fall by the wayside, I think. So, it's come to the point where we either decided that we wasn't going to continue producing the magazine anymore, or we're going to move to another medium, which we've decided to do. And I think podcasting is probably going to be the best way to gain a larger audience, not only in bizarre magic, but also for all the other areas that bizarre magicians are into as well. Because I think you'll agree with me, Freddie, that we're not just aiming this show purely at bizarre magicians, because as we all know, most bizarre magicians have got other, what I like to call geeky interests in horror films and alternative music, and most of us lead an alternative lifestyle, wouldn't you agree?
Oh, definitely, 100%. And I feel there's so many things that you could cover, and I think, this as a minority, bizarre magicians is a part of it. But I think, films, music, like you say, weird places, weird stories from around the world. And that's the sort of stuff that we're going to be covering in this podcast. Just the unusual, the strange, the bizarre.
Yeah, anything the sort of paranormal, ghost stories, the type of it happened to me type of stories. They're always very interesting. We just want to try and give as much inspiration and material as possible to the community in the form of, I suppose, for want of a better word, an audio-style magazine. And best thing of all, it's free.
Definitely, and it's kind of like, I suppose, to appeal to some of the nerdier listeners, it's like a regeneration, like a Doctor Who regeneration. It's gone from a magazine to a podcast, so It's kind of like regenerated itself into a new form. So, well, it's a new format. It's still going to contain the same character the magazine had, because basically the magazine was filled with both of our personalities, really, and the things that we like. So
it was.
That's what it's going to be in the podcast as well, isn't it?
It's going to be a darn sight easier to do as well. It's going to be a case of, just booting the computer up, giving you a buzz on Skype and having a chat and talking about things that we've done over the last month and also things that have grabbed our interest. So in that respect, I'm not going to be sat down for a week in front of the computer designing layouts and then having people pick out typos and stuff on the forums, which kind of pisses you off a bit.
Exactly.
So I think, if someone's got a spare hour and a half, or however long these shows are going to be. Obviously, this is the pilot, so we've got no idea at the moment. But I reckon we could easily fill an hour and a half with material. But if you've got an hour to sit down and read a PDF, you've definitely got an hour to sit down and listen to me and you natter on for 60 minutes.
Definitely. I mean, and I think that as well. It's like it's like another thing you're saying. We don't have the before. It's no people picking out typos. They don't have that anymore. We also won't have people. So when a link comes up saying click this link to download your magazine, and they close the window, and then email saying we didn't get the magazine. So we won't have that anymore. So But
I've actually addressed that. I've actually sorted that out, which I forgot to tell you about, which I think our listeners will be very interested in. As most people will know by the time this show goes out, the whole Lebanon Circle website has been revamped. And I found this really cool little app called Fetch app. And what you do is you just upload your file. So I've uploaded every single copy of the Mystic Menagerie. Okay, so you go to the Lebanon Circle website, you buy it, and it'll automatically send you a download link, right? And here's the cool part. I can set how many times that link is downloaded, right? So I can either set it to once, or I can set it up to 60 times, you know what I mean? So
brilliant.
At the moment it's set to twice, so if someone cocks it up once, they can do it again. But that link has also got a shelf life as well. I can set the shelf life to that link for 2 hours to 60 hours, or it never expires at all. So now we've got better control over how quickly the person can get hold of that magazine, how long they've got hold of it for. It doesn't watermark or get over the whole piracy issue, but it does give you a limited window. If someone's going to share that link, it's going to be a limited amount of time that they can share it for. But that's going to go live hopefully this evening. So I forgot to tell you about that when I called you earlier. But as I say, it's these podcasts are me and you pretty much talking to each other and the audience as well. So
definitely. And also people can contribute. They can add comments or email us, or there's a Mystic Menagerie page on Facebook, so people want to sort of suggest things or things that we check out or look at. Do you know what I mean? Just give us a comment on the page on Facebook, the Mystic Menagerie fan page, and we can look at things. If it's a film you want to look at, or it's a prop or some kind of thing, we can look at that and we can discuss it.
Well, even if they've got a routine, or they've got a story, particularly a routine that they want to sort of share with the podcast audience or the Mystic Menagerie community, we can go over the routine, what it covers, what it does, what's involved, and then just sort of speaking, sort of thinking off the top of my head, maybe there's an opportunity there for listeners if they wanted to invest in that routine or buy it. Then for a small fee they could buy it, and those small donations will enable the podcast to continue, and they get something out of it as well. But this one thing we'll have to sort of look at later on down the line.
Definitely, and we're relying on people to help us with this, you know what I mean? Because we want to provide something that's accessible. We did it with the magazine, it's accessible, it's cheap, but people abuse that, and with this, people want it to continue. We need the support, from the people in the community. So if you enjoy this podcast, give us your support. That's what we need here.
I mean, hopefully, sort of a year or 2 years down the line, a lot of new listeners are going to go back to this initial pilot podcast and sort of wonder where the Mystic Menagerie came from. And, I think printed magazines and even e-zines are becoming a thing of the past. It's, yourself, Freddie, it was like the old fanzines that you used to get in, the goth fanzines and magazines for punk bands and stuff. They were great, but people just photocopying became sort of out of fashion and too expensive, and it just died. And I think that's what's happening with the e-zine and magazines. Definitely. I mean, a good example is with Pye, Wackett and Peck, my other sort of alternative arts company.
Yeah,
I'm not even going to disclose the amount I spend because it makes me feel sick when I think about it. But I actually spent a lot of money put an advert in Bazaar magazine, and off the back of that actual advert in the magazine there was no sales at all, or any clicks from it, or any interest whatsoever. And I've experienced that as well with other magic magazines that I've actually paid for advertising in or been part of. And I think it's just purely down to the fact that people don't buy physical magazines anymore. And even though you've got like a Kindle or an iPad, it's much easier just to stick a pair of headphones on your head when you're at the gym or you're in the car. Obviously, not headphones in the car, but you've got the radio.
No, we don't.
It's so much easier. We're making this more accessible to everybody, and as a result, I think the 200 or so readers that we had with the magazine version, we're going to triple that. I would like to think, even more over the period of, definitely over 2015 anyway.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's like magazines. Is when did you last buy a paper magazine? I mean, I don't read them much now, do you?
No, I mean, the only time I ever buy a magazine is and it's a real last resort because they're so bloody expensive, is if I'm going on a long haul flight somewhere and, and there's going to be crap films on the plane. I've already checked out what they're showing, and I think, okay, well, I'll go and buy a magazine. But it is literally, I flick through it. I don't really see anything that grabs my attention. I just don't, there's not really anything out there that's strange enough nowadays really to grab my attention. So
no, the last magazine I bought was Take a Break's Fate and Fortune. The reason why, and it's brilliant. I mean, the stories in it are like the cover of the one I've got here is I'm foster mum to lonely spirit children. My loved one's ashes talk to me. It's this kind of stuff, and how to be a witch, a beginner's guide. And I was in this. There was a 2-page article about my macabre museum, about my shrunken heads and stuff like this. So, but that is the kind of magazine that I would read, to be fair, because there's some really good stories in it. But to be honest with most magazines, it's like years ago, a music magazine, you might see an article there, someone on the front you like, David Bowie interview, but the rest of it is full of stuff you don't want to read about. Whereas you can go on the internet now and just read that interview, so it's kind of eradicated that. And the same with like e-zines as well. I mean, some people are naive enough to think they can put out a newsletter or a magazine without it being copied. But it is going to be, if you bring out anything that's easy to copy, it's going to be copied. Even a printed book that can be scanned, it's going to be copied,
Definitely.
And I think it's very difficult. Podcast is much better because, for a start, it's free, so why would you want to copy it? And if you did, it's no loss to us.
But we want people to copy it. Copy this and send it to all of your mates and get them to listen to it, because that's exactly what we want.
The Mystic Menagerie Podcast.
Without sort of, obviously, yours and my background are both sort of very sort of strongly related with magic, so there's no way I'd ever want to slate the magic industry too much, but there is definitely a kind of a hoarding of information, and look how much sort of magic, look at how many magic publications I've got, and
yeah, exactly,
a lot of sort of, definitely a lot of file sharing going around. I mean, I've been offered it myself through friends, and I said, why would I want that? Why do I want 500 magic PDFs on a hard drive? I'm never going to read it, and at the end of the day, if I did want it, I'd probably go out and pay for the one I wanted.
Yeah, and I think it's the same with music industries. People just want to have the album. People got hard drives full of music they don't listen to. And the thing is I think people just want to collect it to say, I've got this, I've got that. Do you know what I mean? I know a bloke who had he's a music fan. He's a particular artist that I was into and he was into, but he had 4 hard drives, external ones, as well as computer hard drives, filled with bootlegs and do you know what I mean? And music. These are big hard drives, massive capacity on them. And I thought, you couldn't have listened to all that. You can't sit and listen to all that music. But it's just a case of having it. And that's why the music industry's gone a bit of a downturn as well. That's gone very digital, because people aren't buying stuff so much now.
Yeah.
It's the same. Musicians make money from T-shirts and tours rather than actually selling records. That's an industry that's very much in decline, because human nature is they want something for free, or there's these hoarders that want to collect things. It's the same with the magic industry, music as well. It seems to be I think technology is great in some ways, but it can bring out some of the worst aspects of human nature.
You've got to sort of you have to diversify and look at other options, and without a doubt, I don't think there's any sort of space, or there's no real interest now in physical magazines or even e-zines, to be honest, when podcasting is so popular. I mean, you only have to go on to iTunes and look at the thousands of podcasts that there are out there. You're just spoilt for choice. Any type of genre, any subject, any type of music even, just go there and listen to it, and you never even have to listen to the radio again, which is great, because with everything to do with ISIS and Ebola nowadays, who wants to listen to the radio anyway?
Exactly.
So
it's like, I mean, you can get so many diverse things, and if you're really into a subject, podcasts tend to be people that are as obsessive as you are. So you get all these very intricate things which probably no one else would be interested in, but you find fascinating. So it's something for everybody here. I think I think we're going to cover a lot of stuff. Do you know what I mean? Which does appeal to the bizarre community.
Yeah,
a lot of weird things.
I mean, it's a learning process as well. As I sit here and record this now with you, I've no idea at the moment how I'm going to get this off my computer and onto iTunes, and also make it distributable to the other listeners out there. But I can guarantee by end of play tomorrow it'll be out there, and hopefully we'll have had a number of people listen to it already. As we say, because it is the pilot episode, it is literally you and I introducing ourselves and also explaining why we're doing it. And
definitely, yeah. And the thing is, these things are easier to get on iTunes than you realise, because it's a bit of a plug here. I recorded an album this year with a group, three of us, called The Emperors Are Nice, and we managed to get the album recorded up on iTunes, and the second one's going to be coming out soon as well. So it's quite easy to get it out there, and it appeared up that it's just I didn't do anything as such, you know what I mean? I found a website or a program that does it for you, which is very easy. You just upload it and bang, it goes, and they take care of it. So I think that hopefully it's going to run as smoothly as we hope. Yeah.
I mean, the Mystic Menagerie is all, the previous 14 issues we've got now are always still going to be available. So if you're a new listener and you still want to go back and download those issues, then you can just go over to themysticmenagerie.com. Just Google the Mystic Menagerie and it'll pop up. It's the first hit on Google. And all of our issues are there to download. They're ranging from the first issue, which was free, then they go from around £2, then they went to £3.50, and I think the last two issues went to £4. So, which is still really reasonable for saying you could potentially, what you've got, I would say on average you have about 3 or 4 effects in there.
Yeah,
definitely for the Magic community. It's an investment. You're going to come away with something which is going to be useful to you, especially with some of the people we've had contribute to the magazine over the years. It's been amazing.
Top names. I mean, we've had people who are well known in the field. Obviously Ronnie. Great Ronnie's been there. We've had we've had Reece Shearsmith, we've had Jeff McBride, with so many top names, you know what I mean, contribute stuff to the magazine, which we're grateful for, and people were really behind us, and I think of anything that's like, the people that are involved in it, the people that support it, are very much behind what you do, and we do appreciate the people that support it over the years. About 4 years it's been going, is it? Maybe 4 or 5 years?
Yeah, I think it was your baby at the end of the day, wasn't it? So I think you did the first 2 issues, and then the guy who was doing your art and layout dropped out, so you approached me, and then we kind of picked it up and ran with it from there. And we've been doing it, bashed out sort of 12 further issues over your original 2.
Definitely.
So it's worked really well, and I have enjoyed doing it, but it's just soul destroying when you do something and you just find it out there for absolutely nothing. And I think it happens to everybody in the creative world, because most work is plagiarised at some point, especially if it's good. That's what they say. If your work's good, it's going to get copied at some point. And without blowing my own trumpet, I've had shitloads of my stuff copied. So it hurts.
On one hand, it's flattering. Do you know what I mean? It's flattering, but also, you're not getting credit for your hard work, or you're not getting, it's people are just taking it for free. It's like stealing. I mean, it's like, we're not U2. We can't afford, like U2 do, to force our work upon you for free. But it is. I mean, I say initially I wanted to create something which is for a specific genre, a specific kind of people, which wasn't really covered that well. I think people are fed up, but particularly magic, card tricks and all this sort of stuff, which to me I find a bit childish. But I like darker stuff, more theatrical stuff, and that was kind of really underrepresented, I thought. And the people that is very much a fringe thing.
It is. I think
and
bizarre
I thought
magic.
We kind of helped.
Sorry. After you, mate.
I think we kind of helped push it a bit more forward. Do you know what I mean? Make it a bit more prominent, and it seems to have been so over the last few years as well.
It reached a bit of a peak about 2 or 3 years ago, and then it kind of fizzled out again. So loads of people were getting into the scene. There's a lot of those faces have just disappeared now. Without naming names, but me and you definitely know probably at least 10 people we could name off the top of our heads who were there, and now they've gone. And I think the because it's so sort of shrouded in mystery and dark, the bizarre scene, and I suppose it's not really called bazaar though. When you go into Europe, it's more the storytelling magic scene, which is essentially what it is. It's more story than magic, but the strength of the story reinforces the magic to the point where you don't really need that much of an amazing trick to do it, because the story actually supports it and makes it what it is.
Definitely, and it's quite a wide umbrella. I mean, because it encompasses sort of. I mean, like the stuff I do is not magic. What I do is occult entertainment, and it's very much, you know, a Ouija board, you know, a ghost hunts. I don't do magic tricks, but it comes under that umbrella, you know, because you're presenting it to the public, you know. I think presenting anything that's got, you know, its roots in mythology and the occult and the paranormal, you know, it comes under that umbrella, you know, when you're presenting it to people that normally wouldn't be able to access that. And I feel that it's quite a wide, diverse, more diverse than people realise, you know, the different types of performers that you get.
Definitely.
And different types of people. Some people are magicians, they want to do magic tricks with a spooky theme. Some people are storytellers. And there's people like myself that sort of, you know, very much... it's pretty much genuine, you know. We have a Ouija board. It's not a fake Ouija board; it's a real Ouija board, you know, that kind of stuff. But we allow the public to come along to these things and make it as interesting as possible. So it's a very wide umbrella.
Do you mean it's a Ouija board with no magnets underneath it?
Nothing at all, nothing like that, you know. It's just cards and a normal planchette and an old table which I got for £10 from one of these shops in the high street. Yeah. So, you know, because I'm not really into that kind of thing. I'd rather people just do it because it works, you know. So and that is much more amazing than anything that I've seen. The trickery, to be fair.
Me and Paul Vudini, who I'm hoping to get on. I've not asked him yet, but Paul, if you're listening to this, we'd love to interview you for one of our next shows. We went to Germany back in I think it was May. Went to Bavaria, and we went to a sort of a secret handshakey meeting up in the mountains, and it was a brilliant time. It was a small group of magicians, mainly from the mentalist background, who'd never ever done a seance in their life. And Paul ran this seance, and you know, no trickery, no typical sort of magic, no sleight of hand, nothing. It was literally just all suggestion, and we did glass moving, and they were amazed that it actually worked. You know, they were almost screaming with sort of delight as the glass started moving around the Ouija board on its own, spelling out names, and it was coherent names as well. It spelled out the name Otto, which is actually a deceased friend of one of the people who was there, so it was actually working properly. And they were amazed that it wasn't actually an actual trick. It was a genuine from their perspective, it was a genuine seance. I mean, I'm not saying that, you know, seances aren't genuine, but from a skeptical point of view, you've got to look into the fact that, you know, okay, there's 5 people touching a glass and pushing it around the board. So, but that's another discussion for another time. But definitely, you know, it just goes to prove that you don't need to master thousands of books on different methods and sleights in order to be a successful entertainer in the bizarre magic genre.
No, you just mean mine and Paul Vudini's. But well, like I say, I think that, you know, like you say, the Ouija board is stuff like that. It is fascinating. Do you know what I mean? And I, you know, I've had some things that have happened which are inexplicable. You know, mad, crazy things. You know, but it's, you know, I think I have a background of fascination with the occult, as you do, fascination with horror. And I think, you know, for myself, it started from a very young age. As I know it did with you as well, didn't it?
Definitely, yeah. I can't, you know, going back to probably my earliest memories, they all revolve around something creepy or a strange experience. And I know there's definitely, as we're pretty similar ages, both of us have experienced one thing when we were young that probably, you know, has a strong factor in the way we are today. And definitely. That was, you know, as all people in the sort of 70s, our folks never used to drag us to overseas abroad. Everything was always in the UK, and one of these places was the Isle of Wight. Oh yes. And I think it's the Braiding Waxwork Museum, or it was also known as Braiding the Experience. Is that correct? That's right. They changed the name down to Braiding Experience. Yeah, that was one creepy ass place.
It was mad, crazy, and it just burst your imagination open, because you've seen these things on TV, like I mean, everyone of our generation watched the Hammer films and stuff like that, and I mean, most horror films these days tend to be very silly, or they tend to be about serial killers, but these are all about vampires and myths and black magic and curses and stuff like that. It's very much rooted in mythology. So you see it in Hammer films, and literally going to Brading, you saw it in front of you, literally, didn't you? It made it real.
It's tattooed itself on my brain. I think the first time I ever went there, I probably held on to my dad's leg the whole way around. I absolutely shit myself. But I think that is missing as well in today's... the childhoods of today are too protected from the things that that we had in the 70s and 80s, which scared the crap out of us, which have kind of sort of moulded our imaginations and stuff today. But Brading, there were some things in there that I can still see as clear as day today.
Oh yeah. The same. I mean, it's like these days you get things that are very graphic, things like Saw and all that. So there's no sort of suspense or no fear. No. It's just you've seen it. Now you've seen the worst thing that can happen. What's going to happen after that? But with these sort of films, implied darkness, implied things happening. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It played on your imagination so much. Do you know what I mean? And when I went to Brading, I was on holiday in the 70s, and I was staying at a Pontins holiday camp. It's called Little Canada. And they had all these big trees there, so it looked like a Canadian, sort of forest. But what it was, it's Pontins, so it's very much a holiday camp.
Yeah.
But they had these day trips out there for the kids, and one of them was to Robin Hill, it's like a nature park, which is good, and the other one was it's still there today, yeah. They have nice evenings where they light it all up, all lights and stuff like that, very picturesque little place.
I think that's where Bestival is.
It is actually, you're right, yeah.
They have Bestival there now, and it's an amazing venue. It's so chilled out.
It's beautiful. I mean, Isle of Wight itself is got so steeped in history, do you know what I mean, with ghosts and everything else, do you know what I mean, dinosaurs, Romans, you name it, it was there. And one of the trips was to the Brading Waxwork Museum, and I found the whole thing fascinating because it wasn't waxworks like Madame Tussauds. You wouldn't get somebody, like a celebrity, like the Queen standing there. It was gruesome murders, Yeah. it was brutally violent. It was just, and they took kids to see this, and they were telling you stories about this chimney sweep, like a kid who got stuck up a chimney.
And the fires, the fire. You look down the chimney, and there's a boy looking up at you, burning with a fire beneath him.
It's horrific. It was most horrific, disturbing. And the thing is like, I think if you showed kids these days, there'd be some sort of like liberal council saying you can't show that, it disturbed them for life, and you'd have to pay loads in compensation. But what it did, you end up doing things like a Mystic Menagerie. That's what that does.
Yeah.
It doesn't disturb you. I haven't gone out and become a serial killer or anything like that. I'm just fascinated by it. But there's some, I say, really gruesome stuff there.
Do you remember the girl? There was a naked girl, sort of sitting on a bed getting undressed, and she had like she had her boobs out and everything, and in the background you see the door opening, and there's a guy peeping through the door with a knife in his hand.
That's right. And it was like she was like some sort of chambermaid in like lived in the quarters of below the Victorian house or something like this, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I remember was a girl in a bath, like brutally slaughtered. It's like a girl in a bath with just blood everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the most horrific, you know what I mean? But at the end of it, that's some real genuine artefacts, didn't they, after the waxworks?
They did, and I think they had a shrunken head.
Yep, that fascinated me big time, that did.
They had a devil's, a witch's idol mask, which was a mask that they used to put on witches as they were taken to be burnt, and it was an original mask.
That's right, German, wasn't it? I think.
It was German, yeah, and I think... When did Brading actually shut down? Was it
2006?
2006, yeah. So when it closed in 2006, they actually auctioned off all of the exhibits they had there, and I, via remote bidding, actually bidded on that Devil's Witch's Idol mask and the shrunken head.
Wow!
I actually bid £2,000 for that mask, and someone pipped me to the post. I think it went for 5 figures in the end. It's ridiculous.
Crazy.
But I wanted it. The only reason I wanted it was because I remember it so strongly from when I was a child that I actually wanted a piece of that museum, and I actually wanted a piece of it to remember it by, because it's such a shame that it closed.
Oh, it's definitely. I was so shocked when it closed. You know what I mean? It really. Because I thought when last time I went there was 2003, I think it was, and it was packed. It was packed in there.
Yeah.
And at the end, like you say, where we saw the mask and the shrunken head, they had all medieval, genuine torture equipment from Germany, didn't they? They had an Iron Maiden, I think, was there.
They had the breast ripper, the Iron Maiden.
That's right.
I'm sure they had. I can't remember what. There was all a definite. an array of rusty flesh-tearing implements. There was the tongue grabber, the one that you heated up and
that's right.
twisted the tongue out. That was definitely there.
And the bridal thing that went around a witch's head and held the tongue, those sort of things they had there, and they were genuine. And I think it was more just, I mean, those waxworks were quite disturbing, but seeing these things that were genuinely on someone's head or killed somebody, you know, that's what spurred the imagination even more. You know, it's because you watch these films at Hammer, to see these things actually existed, you know, rather than just in a film.
It's horrific.
It made it real. It was horrific. You know,
I think if you go on YouTube and type in braiding the experience, there is actually videos on there of people who went round probably the year it closed filming the exhibits. So you can actually go on YouTube and still have a guided tour, even though it no longer exists. So you can still see those exhibits.
It's a sad that it's gone. I mean, the Shrunken Head, one thing I remember vividly about, obviously I was fascinated by that, and I wanted one after that, and now I've got one. But it had a mirror behind it to amplify it, because it was quite a small Shrunken Head. It's smaller than most of them.
Yeah.
And it had a big mirror behind it. It was
like a parabola mirror, wasn't it? It was like and it sort of made it all... It morphed its face and made it look even more hideous from behind.
Yeah, it did, and you could see the eyes and the mouth stitched up. Do you know what I mean? It was it was fascinating. You know, as a kid, I like to be dragged away from it to look at the next bit, because I just want to stare at this Shrunken Head.
With the Witch's Idol death mask, they had like a red light simulating fire, didn't it? And then it had the sound.
That's right.
It had the sound of women screaming in the background.
That's right, and even creepier at the end of it. I mean, the last time I went there, they had some really great exhibits, because there were some waxworks towards the end that moved. There was like one for Queen Victoria tapping her foot.
Yeah.
And breathing. The chest was breathing. It looked like a corpse that had been animated. You know, it was that good. And there's this Victorian bloke who he was a taxidermist, but he made like mythical creatures up. I don't know if you remember that.
That was it. I can't remember his name now.
No, I can't either. But he's a tour with a show.
Yeah, it was I might have to hop on
Doctor
to
something or other, or Professor something, you know.
Yeah, it's Professor. Yeah, I can't remember. If you just Google it anyway, most people, if you just go on, you'll find it and go on there and have a look. And
they were amazing. I mean,
they had a Yeti, didn't they? There was a flying kitten.
Yep, flying kitten was brilliant. The unicorn, I remember, it's basically sort of like a small horse with a horn stuck on its head, but it looked real. Golden goose with a giant, massive egg.
Yes,
and I wonder where those things have gone now. I mean, that should have been sold as a job lot. I mean, you could have easily exhibited those. They were fantastic.
I know definitely. There's a YouTube video of the auction house where they actually go around the whole of the auction house filming every single exhibit there.
Really?
So you can go online and watch it. I think it's probably on for about 30 minutes. And it's just a guy walking around with a camera filming the waxwork dummies, the strange taxidermy, the torture instruments. I mean, someone somewhere has got that chimney sweep burning in his chimney, probably in their shed or garage, which is quite disturbing.
It is, yeah. But it was a fantastic. I mean, it was an experience going around, but it's something that like with yourself, you know, it sticks in your memory so strongly.
Yeah.
You know, it's something that it's very... I mean, you go to other places. I mean, I went to London Dungeon as a kid, and I did enjoy it. Yeah, that was great. But it didn't have the same impact, because the stuff there wasn't as real as this.
I think it has something to do with the actual... Not only the Isle of Wight itself being a little bit sort of creepy, because when you're a kid, it's, you know, you have to go there on a boat. It's got that kind of a little bit of a feeling of isolation.
Yeah.
It's got the sort of... you know, the woman in black kind of, you know, you go across the causeway and the tide comes in and there's no way off the island once you're there other than getting back on the ferry with your mum and dad.
Exactly.
And the place I stayed in as well, we stopped in this holiday let, which was near the Needles. I remember you could see the Needles from the holiday let. And it was a weird place. There was like a gargoyle in the back garden. There was a car from about the 1920s which was derelict and covered in snails, which, of all things.
Wow.
And I distinctly remember waking up in the middle of the night, and I suppose you'd call them shadow people nowadays, but I remember definitely seeing a black shadow walking around the room in there when I was a kid, and I was on a bunk bed with my brother underneath who was fast asleep, and I remember lying there shitting myself as this black shadow just kind of walks around the room. And then to top it all off, you know, even if you ran away, you'd run out into the garden where you'd probably get slimed to death by all these snails, and then there's a bloody great big gargoyle looking at you. So you were, you know, for me, it felt a little bit claustrophobic. And braiding itself, the actual house, was it was a Tudor style house, wasn't it? I think it dates from about 1650 or something. It was very old. The floors were all over the place, and it wasn't falling apart. It was well looked after, but it was a bit like a TARDIS because it looks so small from the outside you'd be in there for a couple of hours.
Oh, definitely. Look, it had 2 rooms in it, and it was like massive inside, wasn't it?
Yeah.
There's a courtyard as well, wasn't there, outside as well, where the stocks and stuff like that.
Yeah, and there was a little cordoned off area where it said, if your children are being misbehaved, leave them here overnight and we guarantee they won't be there in the morning.
That's right. You couldn't do that now. You really couldn't do that now.
No, that was like, I remember my dad saying to like my brother or sister, I'm going to leave you there, and they're like screaming. And I think for me, the most iconic part of the Waxwork Museum, and I would say is the thing that's influenced my interest in all things horror and gothic, is the skeleton playing the organ. And
oh yes,
and the woman from, it was a premature burial, wasn't it? So
that's right.
There was the Grim Reaper playing. It was Bach. I can't remember which actual piece of music it was, but it was the typical.
It's the Carter Fugue, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Fugue, yes, yeah.
Plays that, and then as you're watching the skeleton actually sort of sway backwards and forwards, playing the organ, there's this coffin that opens up, and this hand comes out, and you look inside, and there's a woman looking at you inside who's about to be buried alive. And
that's right.
Yeah, that scared the hell out of me, and it still does to this day. When I hear that music, all I think about is Brading Waxwork Museum.
It's so powerful. I mean, it's very Phantom of the Opera, wasn't it? Like the original Lon Chaney Phantom of the Opera. It's very much like that.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, a place I remember, which was a Waxworks, but this is weird because hardly anybody remembers this. And in the 70s, my uncle took me there, and it was called the Palladium Cellars, and it was underneath the London Palladium.
Okay.
And what they were the first sort of animated waxworks. They were like models, but they moved about. Right. And they tended to be things from horror films. They had a few like Al Capone and things like this. But they had the Phantom of the Opera, the Lon Chaney one with the sort of really creepy face. And he was playing that organ.
Yeah.
And he turned around and looked at you. Just glanced. His eyes were lit up, then he turned back again.
Yeah.
And that was just quite disturbing because it's really dark apart from this illuminated bit of him. And they had like a King Kong in a cage who'd rattled the bars and a Frankenstein walking about. And no one else remembered it except for me. But I did look on the internet, found a few people mentioning it, and they had the program. They'd scanned in bits of it, so it wasn't my imagination going wild. I wasn't sort of hallucinating at the age of 7 or whenever it was. But it did exist, and that was quite weird. But it didn't have that same disturbing feel. It was quite a weird experience. But the Isle of Wight had that feel that this is real.
Yeah, I think one thing I wish I still had, which I probably read it to death anyway. To be honest, it probably fell apart in the end, and that was the Brading Waxwork Museum Visitor's Guide.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I had it, and it had all the pictures in there. It had, obviously, the naked girl about to be stabbed to death, the boy burning alive in the chimney, it had the shrunken head. It was to a sort of 7 or 8 year old boy, probably even younger actually, 5 or 6 year old boy, to have a book like that, and your parents just buy it and say, yeah, there you go, and you're looking at these images as a kid, they're captivating and at the same time obviously slightly disturbing as well, but it's that element of being disturbed and scared as a kid which unlocks a child's imagination. I mean,
definitely. We
had a recent child who had a birthday party for my son Seb, and one of the mums who came said that Scooby-Doo is unsuitable for under 10-year-olds. I was like, what? You've got to be kidding me.
That's insane, isn't it? It's like Tom and Jerry saying, it's really violent, do you know what I mean? And it's just a cartoon, it's cartoon. I mean, when I was a kid, things were different, really different. Like I had the same book that you had, and I used to look at that for ages, the guide from the Brading. But there's a lot of things around like that, much more in the 70s. It's like Dracula and Frankenstein were very more predominant than they are now. When you think of a horror, and even as a kid, you knew who they were. And I remember there's a lot of like comics that came out. There was one which was like a poster comic, a story of Frankenstein, and a huge poster of him on the other side.
Yeah.
And I used to have this massive poster on the wall. I was about 4 or 5 years old. I couldn't read I think my parents might have read it to me. But when I was at school, there's a school book. I was about 5 years old. And you had to write, this is my mum, this is my dad, my cat is called this, this is my favourite food. And it had, what do you like to watch on TV? I like to watch Frankenstein. And I'd drawn a picture of Frankenstein. And that's how strong it was, And also in the 70s, you had these books came out. But it's kind of like Osborne, I think the publisher were called. They had 3 books. They were like black covers. And one of them was like about ghosts and vampires. One was about mysterious stories, and they were like horror, and they're telling about Borley Rectory and stuff like that. Do you know what I mean? It's
I think I remember that one. Was did the cover have a lad who was in like a cross country kit running with a Grim Reaper behind him, and it was like really
no, I think the ghost one had like a wraith coming. It's like an old building, it's like an old rectory, and it's wraith that's coming at you. And the vampire one's like a very badly drawn Dracula.
Okay.
But they were quite glossy covers. But inside the artwork was like it's paintings rather than photographs. They were painted. They had like true ghost stories and stuff like psychic powers and this kind of stuff, but they were really for kids' books. They were quite they weren't stories. It's just like this is facts.
Yeah.
It was like Borley Rectory wasn't presented as this could be true or this couldn't be true. This is a fact. And so if you read that as a kid,
yeah,
and an adult has written it, this is true.
Yeah, there wasn't so many skeptics around in those days. As you say, like Borley Rectory or the Enfield Poltergeist, it was taken as, if something happened like that, it was taken as gospel, and that was it. People weren't actually, well, it could have been this or that, or the skeptical mind is something it's definitely become more and more prominent over the last sort of 10 years, I reckon. 70s or 80s, people believed absolutely anything. You told them.
But I think it's a bit like with religion. I think people wanted to believe it. I think that I would rather believe that there are ghosts, that there are vampires, than that the world's a really boring place full of just human beings and animals that aren't treated very well. I'd rather believe that there is things we haven't explored. I'd rather have that wonder, you know. And the funny thing is, a lot of the skeptics are magicians, and they talk about bringing wonder into the world and having people's imaginations. But then there are also at the same time people that quash that from happening.
Yeah.
They're most sceptical people. To me, I'd rather a wonder would be the fact that someone can speak by telepathy. There is a ghost, not that someone can make a card rise to the top. That's not what I think is wonder.
No.
It's like there was a magazine that came out I think it's about 1978 or 79 called The Unexplained. It was like a part work magazine. You buy issue one, then
I remember that.
You get a free binder and all that. That had some mad stuff in it. I read that as a kid, and the first issue had a flexi disc, one of those floppy records. You used to put on top of another record and put a 2p on to keep it rigid. And it was recorded by Constantine Raudive.
Yeah.
He was like the founder of EVP, Electronic Voice Phenomena. And what he'd done is he'd tuned a radio into a certain frequency and asked these ghost voices, and they'd answer back in this very sort of like, faint sort of voice, but quite distinct. And had this woman sort of like translating, because it's in German. She's going, we are sleeping and things like this, translating what they're saying. And that was quite disturbing because after that happened, I was very fascinated by that. I remember when Arthur Lowe from Dad's Army that died. Do you remember he had a heart attack?
Yeah.
And there's quite a lot about him. And I sat home with a radio and I sort of said, I want to speak to Arthur. As you do when you're a kid, you want to see if these things work.
Yeah.
And his heartbeat came on and it sped up really fast.
Strange.
And that was really weird. You know what I mean? Whether it was a sound and I just read it as that or whatever, but I wanted to believe that this thing worked, And then explain some really strange pictures. There's a picture I remember I've not really seen since. It's supposedly from Roswell, of these two blokes with like, typical, FBI black suits and hats on, holding up an alien corpse.
Right, okay.
And there's rumours after people saying it's a shaved monkey and whatnot.
I think I've seen that one, yeah.
Yeah, it's a black and white, or sepia. It's more sepia than black and white. But I was fascinated by that picture, and they had ESP cards in the second issue, and this stuff presented it all as fact, So at the same time, you were getting these magazines like World of Knowledge, which tell you about King Arthur and history stuff like that. Do you know what I mean? Vikings and scientific things, and telling you about physics. Yeah. And this magazine from the same publishing house, I think, was telling you about ghosts, ESP, was it spontaneous human combustion? So that again was presented as fact.
Yeah, especially with programs like Arthur C. Clarke's World of Strange Powers, which I watched religiously, and I actually bought a DVD compilation of all the old shows. Even the theme tune to that was creepy.
Oh yeah.
And I think if I can find a copy of that, I'll actually put it on this podcast for the listeners to listen to, because you might not find it creepy nowadays, but I think if you listen to it as you were when you were sort of 7 or 8 years old, it definitely was eerie. It was definitely a creepy theme tune.
Oh, definitely. And it's a great program. It
was, and there was the one standout episode was the ghost episode, and it was photographs of ghosts, so spirit photography. And there was one ghost photo on there, and I always remember because they got the guys, as usual, they always get the guys from Kodak to have a look at it. And
that's right.
It's a ghost stood at an altar, and is sort of stood slightly to the right of the altar, and it's it's huge. I think they measured it in terms of where it stood and its height in relation to the altar that it stood in front of. And this ghost is about sort of 7.5 feet tall, and it's got a black. It's wearing like a black robe, and it's got like a white dishcloth over its face, and its eyes are kind of sagging down. It's a bit like the Scream mask, but it's obviously a lot scarier. Right. Do you remember that photograph? And it's
I do remember that very vividly. Yeah.
Yeah, it's semi-transparent. It's a very famous ghost photograph, and I'm pretty sure that if you go on Google and just Google ghost photographs or real ghost images, that is one of the ones that pops up. And
it will, yeah.
If anyone can't find it, just drop me an email at either Lebanon Circle or Mystic Menagerie, and I'll send you a link to the picture, because that picture still gives me the creeps nowadays. It's just, I think it's because it's just an odd. I don't think anyone would fake a ghost like that, because it's such an odd looking ghost.
And the look in its eyes as well. It's just a really. I don't know, it sends a chill down your spine, doesn't it?
Yeah. It looks like a monk that's got probably some sort of medical condition, like my brain's gone a minute. What's the one where your skin falls off? Leprosy, that was it. So
that's right.
It looks a bit like a leper priest who's got a cloth over his face to hide his deformity or something. It's a bit like the Elephant Man in a bathrobe.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
Yeah, with his hood up.
Because the program, I mean, I've got the DVD as well, obviously, Clark, because obviously it was very important in my childhood as well, because I had the book, there's a big, thick book that came out with the crystal skull on the front of it. Do you remember the book?
That was it, yeah. Mysterious World, Arthur C. Clarke's right. Mysterious World, yeah.
That's it, quite a glossy book, good photographs in there, and those photographs, I stared at them for ages, and I think that ghost photograph may have been in the book, actually.
I think it's in all of his books. I think it's in all the Arthur C. Clarke books, because I think it fascinated him as much as what it fascinated me, to be honest.
I remember that, yeah, and I got the DVD recently, and it looks very dated. The people that they interviewed kind of look like it looks like a spoof thing now. There's a lot of beards, you know what I mean, and there's a lot of roll neck jumpers.
There's a lot of Welsh people as well.
Yeah, it seems to be a lot of Welsh people.
A lot of Welsh people with beards who've seen weird stuff.
That seem to have all this fish falling on from the skies and seeing UFOs and stuff like that. It seems to happen there. So maybe we could do a Mystic Menagerie podcast from Wales, But there was an episode of The Goodies. When The Goodies did an ITV show, they did a parody of Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World with Graham Garden playing a very convincing Arthur C. Clarke. It's very funny.
Okay.
I've got that on DVD as well. So comparing the two, it's quite entertaining. It's a very good spoof. And that's how big it was, that The Goodies would spoof Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World on their show, which was prime time.
Yeah. It was, that and braiding, definitely one of the, definitely two things that moulded my childhood and made me what I am today. Having said that, I did watch The Evil Dead when I was about 8, I think, and my teachers just thought it was amusing. If I went to school and said I'd just watch The Evil Dead, which was like a video nasty in those days, they just laughed. I think nowadays they'd probably get social services around your house.
Oh, these days they would. I mean, I think that when I was a child, I was allowed to watch, because Hammer was on television quite a lot, particularly in the 70s, and I suppose one of my earliest exposures to horror, there's a cartoon I think called the Groovy Ghoulies, and it's like Frankenstein and Dracula.
That was it.
Cartoon. They used to sing songs in it. And the weird thing with that, I went to the dentist as a child where I was put out, with the gas.
Yeah.
And the most vivid hallucination, like, when you're in a sort of, you're knocked out with the gas, I was inside that cartoon singing with them. And I was quite disappointed to wake up. That's one of my earliest memories of that. But you had lots of things like that around. I mean, Hammer films were quite prominent. And Camera Screaming, obviously, is something that stuck in my mind quite strongly. But I remember Hammer films, they used to be on about midnight or late at night, because I think TV used to close at midnight, so it's probably about 10, 11 o'clock. And so I was on a Friday, I'd say to my parents, can I watch this film with Dracula or whatever? And they'd say, watch it, but if you're scared, don't come quite to us,
Yeah.
And the one I watched as a kid was The Reptile, which is like a Hammer film about this bloke who's half human, half snake. It's set in Cornwall.
Okay.
And looking at it now, it's not really, it's creepy, but it's not horrifying compared to the stuff that's produced these days. It's not gory or anything like that. But I just found it disturbing. Do you know what I mean? As a kid, I did have nightmares about it. Maybe because I was told not to have nightmares about it, I did.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's kind of like don't think of a black cat kind of thing, it's that sort of thing. But I did have, it was quite, I had a dream of it slithering up the stairs. but it's not really that frightening film looking in retrospect. But stuff like that was on TV all the time.
Yeah.
It's rare you see a horror film on TV these days, you know what I mean, or a good one, anything with any atmosphere to it.
I think my mum and dad used to video horror films, because we didn't. My mum and dad they go to bed pretty early, so they weren't going to let us stay up and watch films. So they'd record them for us, and we'd watch them on a Sunday afternoon. The whole family would actually all sit down. We'd just had dinner, when EastEnders is on nowadays, we'd sit down and watch things like The Company of Wolves was on a Sunday afternoon, which, looking back, I thought was perfectly normal, but I think to most people they think it was slightly odd. But there's one film that actually stood in my mind, and that was The Changeling. It was like out in 1980, and it starred George C. Scott, and it's grim. The guy at the beginning he gets out of his car because he's got a flat tire. It's snowing. He's got his wife and his kid in the car. He walks down the road to go and get a telephone to call for a repairman to come and sort his car wheel out. And a truck just drives into his whole family and wipes them all out in one go. So that's like the opening scene. And then, because he's a writer, he wants a bit of sort of space and is trying to get back into writing. So he just rents. It's the typical thing. This house has been on the market for years. It's dirt cheap. And he thinks, great, I'll take it. And you've got it in almost every sort of Hammer horror type film and most 80s horror film. And the house has been ridiculously cheap. No one wants to live there. And when you ask the estate agent what happened there, they go all a bit sheepish and sort of change the subject and run away. It's that typical type of film. But the key or the most memorable moment is there's a child's bath chair or wheelchair, as a wicker wheelchair that just goes round the house on its own, and that again, excuse my French, but absolutely scared the shit out of me again. A wheelchair, and I've always wanted to make a remote controlled child's bath chair. I think you scare the hell out of people with it. There's a part in the film where it's chasing someone around the house. And I remember me, my sister and my brother all huddled together on the sofa, shouting or screaming at the TV because it absolutely scared the crap out of us. And it was such a good film. And that's The Changeling by George C. Scott. It's a bit dated when you look at it now, but it is a classic horror. There's no gore or everything's suggestive. There's no sort of blatant scares in there. It's just your imagination compensates for all the things that you're not seeing, apart from the creepy moving bath chair.
You don't need anything. You don't need gore because that's creepy enough. I mean, babies themselves. People say they're cute, but they've got a creepy edge to them sometimes.
Yeah.
And babies and children, they can have that creepy edge to it. And a film like that's quite. They are powerful scenes, just stuff like that. Just something weird happening. It's quite more, and I think it's more of a case of the idea of what it's going to do to you rather than what it does. Do you know what I mean? If you see someone get killed by it, you tend to think, well, that's what it does. It kills you. But not knowing what's going to happen next and leaving it to your imagination, I think, is really strong. I mean, Hammer left a lot to imagination, those sort of films.
Yeah.
And some of the 70s, some of the creepy stories, you didn't see, like people say about Texas Chainsaw Massacre, they assume it's a gory film. You don't see any of the gore. It's very, very quick.
It is, yeah.
But it's so carefully edited that it implies you've seen something horrific when you haven't.
The more horror of Texas Chainsaw is the fact you're imprisoned in a house that's full of inbred nutcases who are probably going to kill you at some point, but haven't got around to it yet.
And eat you.
I think going back to the interesting thing about children, though, and it's a prominent thing, especially in bizarre magic and and horror, is that I think you've got the innocence of a child, which you've put in horror in a place where it shouldn't be. When you've got children, if you look at some of the most popular horror films that there's been over the last few years, you've got films like Sinister, Insidious, Annabelle, the new doll thing. They all either revolve around children or dolls and children's toys, which, if you leave them on their own as actual single items, children, as a whole, aren't that creepy. Dolls I don't find particularly creepy, and neither are children's toys. But if you put them in a horror environment, they become, one of the scariest things there is. It's a definite catalyst for a hell of a lot of ghost stories.
Definitely, and I think inanimate objects coming to life is something that is quite disturbing for people. Do you know what I mean? The fact that a doll's inanimate, but it looks human, but it isn't. Coming to life.
I think that's what the creepy element of a doll comes from, isn't it? It's the fact that it is, it resembles a small human, and the fact there's a possibility that it could get up and wander around on its own while you're not looking is, could be always in the back of your mind. I mean, if they did that, I'd love it. It'd make my life a hell of a lot easier, and I'd be, encouraging it as much as possible. But But children
definitely.
Yeah. So go on, carry on.
It makes Toy Story seem a bit more sinister, doesn't it? That you get out of the room and they're plotting stuff and talking with each other.
Yeah.
That could be a horror film. That could turn nasty. Toy Story.
Yeah. Toy Story. Yeah, a horror version of Toy Story.
That would work, I think, definitely.
I mean, I have to be careful. I mean, I've got two young kids, and they're obsessed with Halloween, and they love horror type stuff. And my lad came back from school the other day. He's got hairy legs. He's only 4 years old, but he's got little sort of hairy legs. And I always take the mickey out of him and say, "Oh, you must be like a werewolf and stuff." And he came back from school saying his teacher said he can't play werewolves anymore. And I thought, oh, that's really sad. Why can't he be a werewolf?
Exactly.
Yeah, it can be whatever he wants. I'm sure if he was running around the playground saying I'm Jesus, they wouldn't step in and say, "Oh, hold on a minute, you can't be Jesus." But
no.
But you can't be a werewolf. And I just felt, oh God, today's liberals just make me sick.
It's almost like going back in time. Well, years ago, that werewolves and that were kind of acceptable. When we were kids, if I said I want to be Frankenstein, the teacher would, or Dracula, a vampire, that was kind of acceptable.
Yeah.
But I think these days, I think that a lot of people, people think they're more intelligent these days, but they seem to sap any interest or excitement or creativity out of things. Everything's very clinical.
Yeah.
I think particularly when you get these sort of, these liberals that want everything to be a certain way, it's almost like putting everything into sort of a very bland state of mind, a lot of blandness.
I actually heard a rumour, going back to sort of children's toys and liberals, and obviously brings religion into it slightly. But the entertainer, is it the Entertainer, the children's toy?
Oh yeah.
Supposedly, they don't stock or have never stocked any Harry Potter toys because the actual person who owns the company is a New Age Christian and believes that Harry Potter is a demonic influence.
Crazy.
So next time you go past the Entertainer, you need to go in and ask where the Harry Potter toys are, and you'll probably just get politely told, "Sorry, we don't stock that." So.
Yeah, there you go. That's not good at all. And that's the most popular thing. I mean, they're missing a trick there because Harry Potter is sort of like the Star Wars of its generation in a way, isn't it?
It did. Harry Potter did bring. I don't like Harry Potter. I don't mind the story. It's just Harry I don't like. It's just a bit wet for me. He needs to man up a little bit, and that's why I don't particularly like it. But he needs. It did bring back that element of mystery and suspense and a little bit, a few childhood scares back into the children's world today, I suppose, because there wasn't really anything prior to that.
I think the sets are fantastic and the effects.
Yeah.
Well, so the original Harry was around glasses. He was a bit annoying, and he did fit the other woman in black. I watched him in that, and he was supposed to be like a grown-up father. And to me, he's like a child. He's still like a child, and I think that as an actor, he's quite one-dimensional, and as a character, it could be more. I think if Charles Hawtrey with his round glasses had played it, it would have been a lot better.
He would have made a very good Harry Potter.
He'd have been fantastic. Do you know what I mean?
Him slightly humorous, a bit camp as well. It'd have been a good Harry Potter. It would have made it worth watching.
Oh, definitely, yeah. Him or who's the other one who had the round glasses? Arthur Askey. If it was a black and white Harry Potter from the 1950s, Arthur Askey would have been a good Harry Potter. Arthur Askey or Charles Hawtrey, they're the two that I think. But I think the character, like usually you get a character that's got a bit of an edge to them.
Yes.
Like you had Han Solo in Star Wars. He was a good person, but he had a side to him. I think Harry Potter kind of lacks that. He's a bit goody two shoes.
Yeah. I mean, I think listeners might scoff that we're talking about Harry Potter in a horror and bizarre magic podcast. However, these people who sort of were into Harry Potter as children a large percentage of those are going to be newcomers to the scene. They're going to be the next generation because they've been brought up with an element of horror, magic and mystery in their life, and that is going to influence their interests as they get older. And I can guarantee that some of those will migrate over to bizarre magic purely as a result of Harry Potter.
I think so.
Yeah, so it's not such a bad thing in that respect.
No.
Obviously, it's not the braiding waxwork museum of that we were exposed to that's influenced what we do. But I think without that catalyst of Harry Potter, I can't think of anything that was around at the time that would sort of inspire a child to be into that kind of that genre of stuff. Unless you've got the odd kid who likes reading, I don't know, Dracula books and stuff, which is so far and few between nowadays. Kids just aren't interested in that type of stuff.
Exactly. You got Twilight. I mean, they're not very good. I mean, Harry Potter's got shrunken heads in it. I know. I mean, Harry Potter's got shrunken heads in it, and it's got a werewolf, so it can't be bad. You know what I mean? As far as I'm concerned, it's got those credentials itself, and elements of based in sort of witchcraft and magic around it.
Yeah.
Which I think is very good. The mythology's still there. That's still sort of kept quite strong.
I was very impressed with that werewolf. Actually, that werewolf, when I saw it, I thought that's a pretty good werewolf. It wasn't your typical Wolfman type thing. It was the design of it was amazing. It was really gangly and ungainly, and it ran really fast, and you felt uneasy if that thing was galloping at you through the ferns out on the moors. You'd fill your pants pretty quickly, I think.
Oh, definitely, yeah. I mean, it's almost as good as the one in Thriller, Michael Jackson's werewolf.
Yeah, yeah. That is. But if you look at it now, if you look at that, it's actually I think when John Landis on the making of Thriller, they actually wanted to be more of a cat than a wolf.
Yeah, you can see it, can't you, as well?
Yeah, it looks like a puma when he's fully changed. It looks more like a cat with big ears.
And at the time, that was quite considered to be quite heavy. They played it. I think it was first shown at night on Channel 4, about 10 or 11 o'clock. It's considered to be very dark, Now it looks quite comical in places, dancing zombies and whatnot. But there's a warning beforehand with Michael Jackson saying, due to my Jehovah's Witnesses at the time, my beliefs, I do not endorse the occult or have any belief in the paranormal and this kind of stuff. It's quite it's quite well publicised at the time. They had that edge to it at the time, even though now it looks quite dated. They had quite a creepy edge to it. Do you know what I mean? Because I think that's when the video nasties were around. Horror was very big in the early 80s as well.
It was, yeah. You had all, I remember reading Fangoria magazine and looking at all of the films like The Beyond and Reanimator, and looking at the really cool special effects that they used to use, and reading about when they used to film the zombie films to get them to get everything super realistic. They used to actually use real animal entrails and things, which is I thought it was amazing. I used to love it. My copies of Fangoria magazine. I think they were top shelf magazines in those days as well. I remember
they were, yeah.
Yeah, it'd be sort of you reach up for Fangoria next to sort of a Razzle Christmas special, and you felt a little bit sort of dirty going away with this horror magazine, and you'd have to hide it, just in case people thought were slightly odd, but people used to think I was slightly odd anyway, so I didn't really bother.
But that was quite prominent around then. I mean, Fangoria was. I mean, a lot of people used to read that around that time, And I think even before that, I remember during bubblegum cards you used to get.
Yes.
There was Hammer ones that came out, and I used to go and get them from the newsagent from the early 70s. And they had photographs from the films, and they weren't just like still shots of Dracula. They were quite gory ones with blood and all that, and everything, And there was like a Hammer magazine, and there's quite a number of comics as well, which were based around that, and they were quite full on. There was a Tales of the Crypt. Used to get those American import ones, and there's a Dracula, which I think it's a Marvel did the Dracula comic. It's a Dracula comic, and there's quite a lot of stuff around horror based, And then of course when the video revolution came out, everything that you'd heard about but couldn't see at the cinema, The Exorcist, suddenly became available on video cassette. And you could go, you could go, you could binge on all these films you wanted to see. But a lot of weird ones came out then. I don't know if you remember a lot of films that you wouldn't have, like low budget ones, but they were quite gruesome.
Yeah, there was a hell of a lot, wasn't there? It was
Burning.
The independent sort of horror film industry was really on a roll, I think, because they knew that there was money in the shock factor.
That's right.
Yeah.
And kids it was mainly kids that watched horror films then. I remember there was a big purge around the sort of 83, 84. There was a big fuss in the media. All the press, all the red tops saying about video nasties, ban all these films and all this.
Yeah, Mary Whitehouse.
That's right, yeah. And all these films were taken off the shelves. There was a sort of list. There was like a blacklist of Driller Killer and things like that. There was like a blacklist of films they couldn't have or hire out anymore. They were kind of banned films. There's a mass load of films that were banned overnight, just taken off the shelves of the video stores. And there's one near me called the Video Shack, and it's like an old. It was just an old cafe, but this bloke had made it into a video shop. And he was a very strange bloke. He's like a massive bloke. He used to sit smoking all the time, and eating in there. And he looked like a coach for a baseball team or something like that. But he'd let kids hire out really gruesome films and stuff like that. He didn't care as long as he got the money. Yeah. And when this purge happened with these these video cassettes, he sort of said, "Oh, come upstairs," and that sounds a bit dodgy now, but it's like this kid, come upstairs. We go upstairs, and he had this room there with all the banned films that he was supposed to get rid of and destroy. He'd kept them.
Yeah.
And he said that he's flogging them all off for like £2 for that one, £3 for that one.
Yeah.
So me and my mate went there and we bought loads of these banned horror films. Class of '84, The Burning, Driller Killer. We just bought all these video cassettes off this bloke. So we had quite a collection of films for a while that weren't available at all.
Yeah. There's definitely definitely a different experience in those days to what it is today, where you get torture porn just forced down your throat. If you want it, it's there, and it's crap. It's just the whole Hostel series, and I don't know. I've got no interest in that type of horror. I'm purely a psychological horror. That's my, that's what gets me sort of on the edge of my seat. Not someone blowtorching someone's eyes out while they're tied to a chair. That's. Having worked in forensics and seen some pretty horrible things, all that's a little bit too close to home, and you just find yourself being really kind of, you look at it and you think, well, I've actually seen what that looks like in real life, and it doesn't really look like that, and so it's like, well, why bother trying to replicate something like that? What I really am interested in trying to replicate is the real feeling of fear or supernatural fear, because I think it's something that people just don't feel nowadays anymore, unless they openly go out on like a ghost hunt, or which even that's slightly fallen by the wayside with the demise of programs like Most Haunted. There isn't so much heat on that anymore.
No, and I feel like you say, psychological fear is much stronger. I mean, these horror films that came out are quite gruesome. I mean, it's a case of once you've seen it, you've seen it. Do you know what I mean? There was nothing implied. There's nothing left to the imagination.
No.
And I think that they were quite tacky. I suppose the 80s ones look very cheesy now, the effects and stuff like that. And I think they had that tacky acting. So they've got some sort of retro kitsch appeal to them, But the modern ones, like you say, like Hostel, and I watched one of those, and I just found it, to me, it wasn't frightening. It wasn't horrifying. It was just gruesome. It's just gruesome with no actual suspense in it.
Yeah.
But I think the feeling of like something about to happen or something could happen is scarier than seeing it. I feel. I don't know if you know the 70s TV series. There's two. There's one called Thriller and then one called Armchair Thriller.
Yes, I remember those. Yeah.
And Armchair Thriller had the most creepiest music you'd ever hear in your life. It's the most sinister. It's written by I think Andy McKay of Roxy Music. It's this piano music, and I think it's got a saxophone as well, but it's the most sinister...
What's it called again? Armchair Thriller?
Armchair Thriller,
okay, I'll try and find that for the listeners as well. Armchair Thriller.
Armchair Thriller, and the opening sequence shows an armchair, but then like blood drips all over it, and the stories at the time, I remember it was on about 7 o'clock in the evening, and they couldn't show too much gratuitous gore at that time, but you think that it'd be quite tame for 7 o'clock in the evening, and I used to watch it, but I remember going to bed with it in my head, It's a bit of a tales unexpected kind of thing. And some of the stories now, I watched it on DVD a few years ago, and it's quite intense.
Yeah.
For the time it went out and the age that I was watching it, there's some really brutal stuff in it. There's one sort of about this, like a murderer on the loose, like a serial killer on the loose, and they're trying to track them down. And he kidnaps someone's dog at first. Very strange. He kidnaps a dog from a rich couple and has it to ransom, and then kills this dog. And this copper goes, it was a twist in a towel, basically. It ends up that the copper's boss is the murderer, but he puts a plastic bag over this bloke's head and suffocates him, but it's very slow.
Yeah.
And it shows it in very slow and I'm thinking this is on at 8 o'clock in the evening, do you know what I mean? But there's an episode of Thriller where this girl, she has an argument with a bloke in the street. She works an office block, and she has to work there overnight on her own, like do a night shift, just doing this reception. But it's only her in the building, and this nutcase gets inside the building.
Yeah.
And the whole hour long is like a cat and mouse chase of her trying to get away from this guy, who wants to kill her. And it's the most intense psychological piece of television I'd seen at the time. She's in the lift, she's trying to go to the top floor, and she sees the buttons going down where he's pressed it and stuff like that. And it's the way it's done, the drama between it, although it's just like two people most of it. There's no gore or violence in it. It's
I think
so
you can
intense.
get those on I think it's on the same DVD company that released
Network.
the Arthur C. Clarke ones as well.
That's right, Network. Yeah, I've got a Thriller and I've got Armchair Thriller as well, and I watched them again. They're still quite. I mean, I know that I've got nostalgia attached to it because I saw it as a child, but they're still quite intense.
They still hold up today. Yeah.
Story-wise, obviously the clothes they're wearing and the way they speak and the acting is obviously dated, but the stories and the way it's filmed on a budget they've got, it's got that suspense there. There's no gore, but it's very suspenseful. It's got that fear that something could happen.
Yeah, cool. I'll have to check that out, but I'll definitely try and find the theme tune to that and Arthur C. Clarke as well, and I'll stick it on at the end of the show just to so the listeners can have a bit of a listen. Well, definitely. I think looking at our running time now, we've actually gone over, rolled into like the second hour, so it's right. We're managing to sort of we've definitely got stuff to talk about, put it that way, when it comes to podcasting. So
loads.
I think what we'll do is I think we'll sort of wrap it up for today, as this is our pilot, as it's the pilot episode.
Yep.
And we hope that everyone out there has had a sort of a good listen and at least a bit of a laugh listening to me and Freddie natter on. This is the way we usually talk when we was producing the magazine. Would actually talk like this for a couple of hours anyway, and it just seemed a shame that we never recorded all those conversations and made them into a show. So, we've gone full circle, and that's exactly what we're doing now. So, one door closes, another one opens in that respect.
Yep, new beginnings and new adventures.
That's it. So I think what we've got lined up is we're going to have another show in November. So we'll be back probably around mid-November with another show. And on that show, we'll have some definite, we'll have it divided up into certain areas. So we'll have reviews, an interview, also look at some things that are happening in the press at the time, which have a kind of a paranormal slant to them.
Yeah, definitely.
And and so if you've got any, obviously if you're listening to this show, if there's anything you want to sort of hear in particular, then just drop us an email at either the Mystic Menagerie. You can either find us on Facebook at the Mystic Menagerie, or you can email us at Dan or Freddie at themysticmenagerie.com. And we'll, any suggestions you've got, we'll gladly take them on board and try and incorporate them into our show.
Excellent. Yeah, we hope you enjoyed it, and we shall hopefully see you next month. And we have more exciting things to talk about, and we'll cover a lot more. There's a lot more to come. Me and Dan can talk for hours about stuff. But there's so much more that we can bring to you. And there's films, there's real life stories, there's myths and legends. That's the sort of stuff we're interested in. That's the sort of stuff that, if you're listening to this, that you'll be interested in as well. So hopefully we can get some interesting things going, some discussions on the page and Facebook as well.
As a bizarre, if you're a bizarre performer, you're going to find this a huge wealth of inspiration to fuel your imagination. That's what I'd like to think, anyway.
Yeah, and lots of things to check out as well. So already we've given suggestions of films to check out, YouTube. You'd have a good afternoon there, just looking at things, episodes of Thriller, looking at the Braiding Waxwork Museum. Checking out the Changelings, you know what I mean? There's so many things that you can check out now as well, which hopefully will fire your imagination. We can point you in the direction of some very interesting stuff as well. Stuff that's inspired us. Yeah. And hopefully have the same effect on you.
That's it. Have a look at those things. They're things that kind of made me and Freddie what we are today. So, okay, thank you for listening. And we're going to leave the show, and we're going to leave you with the theme tune to Arthur C. Clarke's World of Strange Powers and Armchair Thriller. See you next time.
Fabulous. See you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.
The Mystic Menagerie Podcast, the Journal of Alternative Arts.